And it's already, can somebody give Daniel Alberto, what time is it?
It's showtime.
It's showtime, guys. You can go ahead and get started whenever you like.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Ariano. I'm from Central South Texas, pretty much. Michael Ariano. I am a motivator, and I am also survivor of HIV. This conference on the 2024 International Conference of Stigma is to learn about leadership. How do we overcome and collaborate and network with those leaders that perhaps they want to participate in leadership on the HIV healthcare system, but sometimes our leaders, something hinders them to them. I want to meet my friends, my colleagues. Alberto Perez from Miami. They will talk about a little bit about themselves, and then we'll start the presentation. And also my other dear friend from way on the East Coast, the West Coast, Daniel G. Garza. Welcome, gentlemen, to this amazing international conference of the Stigma. We're here to empower and lift us. But before we start, I want you all to know this. And I wrote this message for everybody. Leadership is not about who's in charge. It's about how we inspire and transform people's lives in our community. So, Daniel, can you just briefly to the audience introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. Hi, everybody. I hope everybody who's there in person is having a great time. And for those of you watching from home, hello, my name is Daniel G. Garza. I've been an HIV advocate for about 24 years now, long time. I started my work in South Texas. I'm a Texas boy, just like Micah. And I'm so happy to be here. Looking forward to the presentation and to taking some questions from you folks. Thank you.
Alberto.
Hello, everyone. How's everybody doing? Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. My name is Alberto Perez Bermudez. I've been doing a lot of HIV work for the past few years. I've done a lot and continue doing it because that's what I like to do. As one of the community leaders that are doing, things like that. And hopefully we'll be able to come together for one cause. And that's what we want to do.
Thank you for sharing. So, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. And, as leadership, I believe, how do we in the culture overcome taboos within the leadership community? I think that's one of the challenges we have. So we'll repeat this conversation in bilingual. We'll say it in Spanish also. So hay supone de muchos tabús en nuestra cultura, en nuestras culturas de líderes. ¿Qué son esas barras, decimos nosotros, de que los frenan a ayudar a la comunidad, especialmente en VIH y SIDA? So what are the challenges or what are the taboos as leaders? Because sometimes leaders in the community mean well to help, or somehow I share my experience in life that has hindered us to really engage and empower community through the HIV crisis that we still continue growing with the diagnosis. So I want my panelists to share only the experience. Well, how do we overcome that? So, Daniel, because Daniel, you work a lot also in the community with HIV and cancer and all that stuff. In your interpretation, what is the challenges or the taboos as leaders that somehow, hinder us to engage in the cause?
Sure. It's actually when you invited me to be on this panel para participar, I was very excited because it's something that has been part of my platform pretty much as I started doing advocacy work. Para la gente, for everybody listening, I was born in Monterrey, Mexico. We moved to Texas when I was 3 years old. I'm the son of a Texas dad and a Mexican mom. I always call myself an original Tex-Mex. And there's three things that I talk about constantly, que son lo que nos para, and it's what stops us: religion, social norms, and culture. Porque it doesn't matter si eres, if you're first generation, if you're recently an immigrant, if you're fifth generation, esa cultura, the way we think trickles down. Even if you don't believe in God anymore, there's still that little bit of traditions de la abuela, de rezar, to go pray. Even if you are a citizen, if you were born in the States, esa idea, the idea of like fearing immigration and border patrol, that still exists in our brains. And the taboos when it comes to religion and not wanting to talk about sex and sexuality. It's taking the Pope, I would just a couple of years ago, to be able to really identify and acknowledge the gay community. So todo eso, all of that just affects the way that we think as a Latino community. And you can ask anybody around you. It doesn't matter, again, if you just immigrated to this country or you're fifth generation, eso te va a afectar. It's going to affect the way we talk about HIV and AIDS.
Thank you. Alberto, we're talking about how do we overcome the culture taboos within our leaders? ¿Cómo podemos romper los patrones, los géneros, como líderes, que a veces que los frena de líderes en nosotros? Estamos hablando de todos los líderes. A veces que se están involucrando, quieren involucrarse en la causa de VIH, pero algo los frena a nosotros como latinos, la cultura. So what is that, in your interpretation, in your experience, what has hindered us as leaders to move forward together in overall, all together, to participate, to strengthen our leadership, and especially with HIV? Share with us, Alberto.
Okay, I would do that. I noticed through the years that one thing that people do is to divide us, between the white, Hispanic, and the gay, straight, and all of that. And we had to come over that, so like that we can be able to have everything that we need to do for the Hispanic community. That's number one issue. The second issue I noticed that is about taboo is that Latino is still thinking about it's a gay disease, and we have to come over that too. Those two issues so far I noticed that. But if we had to become more strong and go to whatever we need to do, we do. And also the last thing I want to say is that as everybody's a leader, we should come together for one cause, and the cause is to make sure all Hispanic and everybody else included and to be part of it. And that's about it. That's my.
And you mentioned something, the taboo. How do, give me an example, either Daniel or you, give us an example. How do we overcome those taboos? Because those taboos vienen de cultura, creencia, y they come from the belief system, right? And I believe people placing things in belief systems sometimes hinder us to be a strong leader in the community, to serve. So son barras o creencias que los aferran a nosotros a ser líderes en la comunidad. ¿Me pueden explicar los dos cómo podemos a romper ese patrón que los agendan, nos aferran a nosotros así líderes, los tabús?
You want to go first?
Sure. ¿Cómo rompemos los tabús? How do we break down those taboos? How about an exorcism? I think that would be a really great start. But if you don't have an exorcist near you, platicando, but we need to take the conversations out of these rooms, because it's, we're preaching to the choir most of the time. We're talking amongst ourselves. Ya nos conocemos. We know the story. We know how it goes. We know where the doors are. Pero it's doing the work, and I'm going to pat ourselves on the back for a minute. It's doing the work that the three of us do, is going out into the community, going into the areas that normally would not talk about sex or sexuality or HIV, and sembrando raíces, you know what I mean? Like putting down roots, and you have to be a constant. Lo que pasa muchas veces, I think that happens is we get money, we get funding, and we go one time to a church, or we go one time to a school, or a health fair in a community. Y ya no volvemos. We don't go back. There's no, and sometimes I understand. Sometimes there's no money. Sometimes it's hard to go back into the areas. But we go once, we do a presentation, we get people all ready to talk about it. And then there's sometimes, and I'm not everybody, but sometimes there's no follow through. There's no coming back to them. And we leave them hanging. And it's easy to fall back into the taboo. See, it's easy to fall back into that comfort zone. But I think, and a lot of us have done it, we are constantly showing up, aunque no nos quieran. Even if they're like, ahí vienen a hablar de HIV otra vez, ahí vienen. But yes, I think that's what it takes sometimes. In order to break the taboos, we need to get comfortable. I mean, let's look at history. And I'll let Alberto speak right away. Look at history. Yeah. A lot of the things that broke down over time, interracial marriages, and I'll leave it at that one. All of those, I mean, that's a big one, especially like even in the Latino community. People don't realize in their history, there was a time when Latinos couldn't marry white people either, but that's not in the books. But ahí estábamos. We did it. We broke it down. So I think in order for us, I mean, we've been at it for what, over 40 years now? We just need to, I don't know, keep going and keep showing up. I don't know, Alberto?
Okay, one thing that we need to do to break all these taboo things that we need to do is go through a family first, you know. A family mean a lot to us. For example, like mother, father, son, whatever it is. But we have to do it constantly, like, you know, like once in a blue moon, that doesn't work. We haven't been able to do and break those taboo because we're not doing it like every day through social media, through whatever we need to do, you know. So that's number one issue. The second issue, we should go and you know, we need more leaders, to be honest with you, and we don't have that many, only 2-3 people. We cannot, you know, do so much. But if we united, we're gonna be more powerful. Hopefully, we do that. And those taboo can, you know, it's easy to break down. But the thing is, people, they don't care about it sometimes, and sometimes they do. So things like that, you know. But hopefully, we'll be able to do that soon.
I think, thank you for both of you sharing. I think it's having that dialogue you mentioned, persistent. We are active older adults. People call us seniors, right? Over 50 would consider active older adults seniors, right? The new generation is to engage with the new generation and the mature generation, the active older adults, seniors, to have these dialogues. Because I believe you mentioned two things, both of you. The funding, we get the funding and then we go and do the little parade. But there's no follow-up. And I think there should be a follow-up. And then through that follow-up and trained, have a conversation with the Latinos population also, those leaders, is identify those leaders. And then when we identify those leaders is how do we empower them? How do we give them strength? What are the barriers or challenges in the culture to overcome? Es involucrar a la nueva generación también en la tercera generación o tercera edad, involucrados a tener esas pláticas para enfuerzar el tema en la comunidad de VIH. No más porque tenemos fondos o recibimos fondos con nuestras fundaciones, no es para más un tiempo, es el largo tiempo. Ya pasaron más de 40 años. Ha cambiado el sistema, la educación, el VIH, los tratamientos, ¿verdad? Y hay oportunidad nosotros para enfuerzar ahora, porque entrando el próximo año va a haber muchos, como digo, dudas, y cómo de esas dudas nosotros sanamos o ya tener la voz para enfuerzar lo que es el caso de ser líder en VIH. So we have those challenges as the new year comes in. 40 years has passed and some of us are long-term survivors. I call them thrivers because I'm a thriver. I'm a survivor. But also I lived for 40 years and we saw people die from AIDS complications. The new generation has probably not experienced that. And so we have to have these dialogues so we can strengthen the cause as we emerge to 2025 with new administration. We've done that before 40 years ago. And you can elaborate with me, some of you, even in the audience perhaps, but you know, Daniel and Alberto, I was in the 80s when the crisis of HIV and AIDS and, you know, treatment was so limited, right? And so we have to stand ground as leaders and took that torch, what I call leadership, which I'm ready to give the torch to someone else. It's going to get to that point that we're active older adults in the advocacy of HIV and healthcare. It's time to give the torch to someone and empower those people. And to them is the audience is, you're welcome to ask questions. Say, hey, you have a question, because this is what it's all about. On leadership, having dialogue. And so I'm going to pause for a little bit. If anyone in the audience, I know they're allowed to come and say anything, how to strengthen leadership, how to just continue that advocacy. Now than ever, the advocacy is so key as we emerge to 2025 with new leaders, that we need to advocate. We need to have that dialogue with those leaders, not because new leaders come in their system, they're not aware, we might not agree with them, but I think at the end of the day, we had to find solution for humanity, for the cause of HIV. So if anyone anytime wants to say anything with us, questions, give us some feedback, that is well appreciated. I'm going to go to the next question that I have here. It says, how can we create opportunities collaborative between leaders in the LGBT community? So share with me, Alberto or Daniel, how's that? How can we do that opportunity collaborative? As you don't have to be part of, well, we're open, receptive leaders, but maybe they're not members of the LGBTQ plus community, Latinos, but someone from the outside, how do they could collaborate? What opportunities are there for them as leaders? Either one of you could share that to the audience.
I would say that, like I always say this, and I'm gonna repeat myself, but the only way we can do this if you all of us come together for one cause, and we need to do that and start dividing the people. If they divide the people, it's like they're not doing what we need to do. So let's make it happen. I'm the type of person that I like to unite everyone. It doesn't matter your sex or anything like that, That's why we're now, doing what we're supposed to do. But hopefully we'll be able to get rid of that.
The stigma, because that's what it's about. It's breaking the stigma within leadership. And I'll elaborate a little bit more about my experience on that. But Daniel, you want to share anything?
Yeah, so how do you want to know how we bring people together to collaborate?
Yeah.
I always say una taquiza. that brings everybody together. Who's not happy with some tacos? But after the tacos are over, I've been very fortunate, and follow me here. I've been very fortunate that when it comes to diagnosis, I'm part of the HIV community. I'm part of the cancer community, ostomies, mental health. And a long time ago, when I was diagnosed with AIDS originally back in 2000, I made a deal with myself, and I made a deal with the disease. And I said, if you're going to live in my system, you're going to pay rent. I'm going to put you to work. And I think that's what motivated me to be an advocate. I always say that you don't choose to be an advocate, it chooses you. And in this case, being diagnosed with HIV was my door. It was that Harry Potter invitation. You are now part of this club. What are you going to do? And then when I was diagnosed with cancer in 2015, it gave me the opportunity to figure out, because for those of you, it's anal cancer, and anal cancer is very connected to HPV and HIV. So when I found that out, I was like, oh, wow. Oh, and plus I'm part of the HPV community as well. When I found out, I was like, oh, wow. I now have the opportunity to connect these groups together and bring them and see how it affects not just me as a Latino gay man, but other men, other gay men. And then when I had my ostomy surgery, that was another part of it. How do I implement this? And I agree with Alberto. Within the HIV community, we need to come together. Gay, straight, white, black, every color in between. Let's come together and figure out, what are we going to do next year? Porque ahí viene. We already know we're going to have some difficult times next year. This is not a time to separate. This is a time to unite. We're like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Let's unite and fight together. But then, once we know what we're doing, then we can talk to the other diagnosed and say, hey, HIV is very connected to cancer. How can we work together? HIV is also very connected to addiction. How can we work together? In numbers, In numbers, it's how we're going to fight all this. Porque cuando la gente habla, people listen, but we need to come together and find a similar message. I think, not that we're all wrong, but I don't think we're all right either. So,
thank you. You know, I want to say up there your comments. I'm reading your comments. Marcelo, thank you for your comment. It's a process, breaking the cycle and building by the builders, right? And I was, in my experience as a leader, been doing that since the late 80s with HIV and AIDS crisis, human rights and all that stuff. When, you know, leaders in the administration and in the White House was not allowing, for some reason, not aware, educated, to provide the research and treatments. Back then, ACT, I have friends that have crossed over, left school, what I call Earth School here, left very young because of the lack of awareness, education, treatments and all that. And we're advanced now, right, on treatments. But the thing that I being as an advocate, being as a leader, being as a developing community and, you know, developing nonprofits and et cetera, and the public speaker like we do that, one of the things that I experienced in 2022, I was diagnosed with HIV, I was exposed to it through a medical procedure in third world country. And I was going through a divorce. And so I had double whammy, right? And so HIV, also in the mental wellness, HIV plays a role in that too, because you're dealing with so many life events and life experiences and life trauma. And so I now see it and say, thank you for that experience, because I was very strong and been strong as an advocate, as a leader, policy changes and treatments and all that. And I remain doing that. But something shifted my life, and it was my diagnosis. And so going to the courts, trying to do the malpractice, getting the lawsuits and all that stuff. And then when you go to a lawsuit at the world country, it's very, very different. You're an open book for their society. And so that was resolved. But one of the things it taught me is I am where I am here today. And I know HIV does not define me. And I had a really quick shift of who are the people, places, and things that inspire me, transform me to where I am now, and giving me that strength. And I'm grateful for all my mentors. And my colleagues here are also my mentors. I see all my life journey in Earth School. I see everybody is my teachers, and I'm the student learning. But I learned through this life changes in my life with HIV has given me so much opportunity. And yes, as a leader, we carry the torch of, it's like carrying that cross, and I'm not going to jump into the religion, carrying that cross of the weight sometimes, because as leaders, it's not that, you know, we were looking for leadership. It just came to us as leaders. There was a purpose, there was a call. And all of us in this today, even our guests, find yourself, where's the calling in healthcare? It's the healthcare is in managing, providing healthcare to somebody, case management. You know, find yourself that passion and stay grounded and continue learning from resources and becoming that leader strong and breaking that stigma, that the stigma comes, believe me or not, from belief systems, people, places, and things, and the culture, and sometimes religion, not spiritual. Religion has hindered us to become that voice of strength of in the leadership, and especially with HIV, especially the Latinos. So we have to be very aware, where is that stigma coming from? I always believe to these people are saying this, is it a fact or is it interpretation? 95% what we hear, we interpret is interpretation, not a fact. Because we can do research if there's a fact. So as you become and as a leader and in playing those roles, leadership in healthcare, you know, it's so key to know, find yourself, who you are as a leader. And Daniel, I'm better to elaborate on this. Knowing who you are, finding the leadership. That is so key. Are you comfortable in that leadership, in that role? What are the issues that you need to, or live events that you need to process? Because it comes to you as a leadership. It will test you. That is so key. And I just want to share that with everybody. So there is a question here. Let me go, God. This is quiet. Are you leaving the mute? Everybody's here, and I believe
that's the AI version.
Okay,
yes.
okay, here we go. The AI is coming in with us. Technology, right? And I'll leave it that, my expression on that. But the other question that I want to just to share is, what strategies can we implement to foster a dialogue to understand within the LGBT community, heterosexual population leaders? So I'm going to repeat the question and we can share that with the audience. What strategies can be implemented to foster open dialogue, understand between the LGBT community, heterosexual leaders? What strategy can we implement to foster that dialogue? And I think you mentioned earlier something, Daniel. How can we strategize to implement that open dialogue between the LGBT community leaders and the heterosexual leaders to break that stigma?
I think, Alberto, you want to answer this one first?
Yeah, please.
Do you want me to repeat it to you, Alberto?
No, I got it. Thank you.
Got it. Okay, got it.
I mean, like I was saying, we human beings, but we need to be together, you know. So everything that's gonna happen, we need to realize that if everybody's together, we'll be able to do whatever we need to do. As a HIV heterosexual Hispanic male, sometimes I feel alone because there's not that many people out there, but hopefully we'll be able to recruit more people. We'll be able to do everything, and I do really think that God want me to do this, and I do it from my heart, and I'm gonna be doing it no matter what. But we need to, hey, Mr. And we need to do that. I mean, in order for us to work together as for one cause. I always say that.
So, but give me one strategy. The strategy is give me an example. How can we break the stigma between perhaps leaders in the LGBT community plus in heterosexual and coming together? Give me an example. How can we do this? I know working together is very broad, but maybe could be one. And having somebody mentioned Daniel, tacos on the road. You know, maybe that's bringing menudo pozole, and those that pozole is a Latino soup, right? And so, o fajitas. Give me one example. How can we do that?
I would say social media, because I use my social media in every single way. So I would say we should do a campaign for everyone, not only the gay community, but the straight, everybody else, you know.
So having those dialogues in social media platform, right?
Yeah,
like we're doing now.
Yeah, we need to do that. I mean, in order for us to get rid of the HIV stigma, things like that. If you wouldn't do that, we're still gonna do so many years went by, and we haven't been able to do it.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel.
Yeah, you're looking for a specific strategy. It's something that I've been practicing for several years now. I had to remember, even though, and just for a disclaimer, I came out when I was 17. I'm 53 now, so that's a lot of years. That's a lot of years. Don't do the math, folks. Don't do the math. Pero I had to remember.
There's a pero word.
There's always a pero. I had to remember when I'm going out to speak to a group of heterosexual Latino men that I have to remember there was a time when I lived in my parents' home. I had that paternal male energy that I lived with. There was a time when I walked around in the world as a straight boy. I hung out with straight Latino men. And I had to remember how those conversations would flow. Where did we have those conversations? How did they start? And por eso when people laugh when I say about the tacos, but I remember being a young boy, and for everybody who's Latino, and particularly Mexicanos, I remember my dad, me being like 8 or 9 years old, taking me with him for the day, meeting with the tios or with the compadres over a bonfire and drinking beer. But this is where they would have those intimate conversations. So as I've grown up and became an ambassador and an advocate, I thought, why am I trying to bring them to my space and make them uncomfortable? Why am I not going to them? So when I say la taquiza, number one, tacos are my favorite thing in the world. Number one. Number two, if I want to get together with my people, my Mexicanos, hey, vamos a hacer una comida, un cafecito, un pan dulce. Let's chat. Let me come to you and make let me make the space comfortable. Porque como Latinos, we're usually not comfortable being honest with anybody at a clinic. My mom used to say, hay tres personas, there's 3 people in the world that you pretend to be honest with. Your priest, your doctor, and the IRS. And everybody. So why am I bringing you, compadre, into my space if it's going to make you uncomfortable? Let me go to you. So my strategy has been for a long time is, ¿dónde estás? Yo voy contigo. I'll come to you. Let's have a conversation where you want to be. That way we can get intimate. We can talk about condoms and sex and being in the down low and anal and oral sex. But if I bring you to a clinic to talk about that, you're not going to be honest with me. I want you to be a friend. I want us to have a conversation. So my strategy is, if what you're doing is not working, then you got to see where you're doing it. What people are you talking to? What places are you doing it? And what things do you have around you to make it comfortable?
It builds a capacity, builds la capacidad de líderes en un espacio cuando todos estamos de acuerdo en conforme. It's a space as leaders where we can reach and go to them. I work in the healthcare system and in education, and we do compadres on the road. Back in the day with the school district, we would go with 5 or 10 parents in the community, and there was like a place, maybe it was not their home, maybe it was a local center. We go to them and have these dialogues to break the cycle of whatever they were dealing with academically, family development, healthcare, because even in my educational system, we talked about healthcare. We talked about sexuality. We talked about, they were more comfortable at forming that leadership and breaking the taboos, breaking the stigma that carries on from generations, from cultura, creencia, right? And you nailed it right there. It's having these dialogues. And our participants, we have about 20 participants right now. They're on the chat. And anytime, send us a little note, what you want to know about breaking the cycle of the stigma within leadership and in community, or what would be an opportunity or collaborative tool that we can advise you to in your community as you serve those communities. Because some of you in the audience are either in the
That's
HIV.
on here.
Excuse me?
Oh, you're talking about up there. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Okay. So
before you move on to the next question, I just wanted to add this part, because what you're saying about making it comfortable. When I first was diagnosed, the first place that I volunteered was the Valley AIDS Council in McAllen, Texas. And we would have potluck and loteria every other Friday. And between eating and playing loteria, for those of you that know loterias, the Mexican bingo, between games and eating, we would talk about HIV, but we would invite the families or friends of the clients to come and join us. And that's how we would get the message across. So you have to be resourceful. We have to be resourceful. Okay.
One of the questions, thank you for sharing that. I think it's Pastor. Thank you for sharing your notes here. It's the challenge in the people of color, and especially in the heterosexual population. I think, Alberto, you can elaborate on that. I know, Alberto, you can see the response back. I think the lack, and I see it all this for years, and I share that with Pastor, my experience. In the 80s, when the AIDS crisis hit us and tried to wake us up, I'm in my interpretation as a leader and as a policy changer in healthcare with advocating and still advocating, especially the new 2025 policies are really on board, is the lack of funding for those underserved population, people of color, men of color, heterosexual. And back in the 80s, I was very few leader that I would advocate for the feds to allocate more funding into those populations. I believe in my interpretation, and I'm going to be wrong, but just I speak from my heart and my experience. They focus so much on one population, right, and the LGBT community plus, right, and it was needed. But somehow I think we were set up for something in that system, and we missed the mark here in providing equally funding for all walk of life. That means in those populations, people of color, Latinos, men, heterosexual. And this is something now that is so key, that this is the time that we have to stay strong, focused. And as the new leadership comes in 2025, we have advocate the funding that is allocated for those population that perhaps for so many years it's been underserved. And I continue advocating for adequate funding for all populations, that somehow the system focuses on one population, and it's needed. But I believe, and I also do this when I serve in committees, is when there's advertisement, it's not only the LGBT community plus, it's everybody. So I like to see ads in heterosexual population, right? Because it's so needed. So that's the only thing we can break the taboos and the stigma for those people that somehow are not aware, educated in the HIV. We're in a young country. You mentioned that, Daniel. You're a very young country that we don't talk about sexuality. In different countries they do. I travel the world and have the privilege to travel the world and serve in developing nonprofits. In some countries, they have these dialogues in groups, and the rate of raping is very low. The HIV could be low because they have these dialogues. I'm here in our own country. We're very young and we have work to do, but having these dialogues is so key. So hopefully that answers some of the questions, Pastor. And we have a lot of work to do.
I wanna say one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Roberto. Go ahead,
I
Roberto.
wanna ask Pastor Andres if he wanna say anything, and if he wanted to do so, go ahead, Pastor Andres. Otherwise, I speak about that because you mentioned something that we haven't done for years.
Amen. Yeah, I think it's truly, I really appreciate, and again, I'm Andre McGuire, I'm Pastor McGuire. It is a blessing to be here and have an opportunity to add my little 2 cents in here. It really hurts. I, for one, had I managed a program, and when I managed a program, when I came, there were 13 people in the program. When I came in, the one thing that I guaranteed everybody is this is going to be a safe space for everybody. I don't care who you are. If you're living with HIV, you're going to need somebody to talk to. And if nothing else happens, you'll be able to come here and talk. Within, I think, 9 months, we had over 120 people that were there. Black, Hispanic, white, gay, straight, didn't matter, because everybody knew if we go here, he's going to give us help. He's not going to get caught up on stuff, because I don't care. As far as I'm concerned, every one of us have things that we deal with. That's our own stuff. What we have to work on is HIV. In going to the Black community, particularly the Black faith-based organizations as a pastor, one of the things that I will always do, I don't need to go in there and start trying to find niche things to talk about. I go in there and bring the statistics. The statistics say your congregation is dying of HIV and you need some help. I can give you some help. I haven't found anybody to say they don't want help yet. And once we get ourselves past fighting against each other, we'll be able to resolve the problem. I hurt when I hear so many people saying that, well, we know that there are so many heterosexual Black women that'll be diagnosed with HIV. It'll be more than of them than anyone else, any other women, period. And then I hear 65 to 70% of those women say they got HIV from a heterosexual Black male. But nobody wants to address heterosexual Black men. How are you going to find out who has it if we're not out there trying to test them? And I understand, we invested money for years and still invest money, trying to make sure that we attach one portion of our community. But within the HIV community, probably the most stigmatized group there is heterosexual Black men. It hurts for me to show up, to be present, and then not be seen by anybody, because I'm heterosexual. So that's all I wanted to put in.
Thank you, Pastor, for sharing. Alberto, you want to share something?
Like I was saying, I had a dialogue where you're saying to me is that we should give message. For example, I got one, remember you told me about it. Hopefully we can come out with flyers, things like that. HIV can happen to anyone. It doesn't matter if you're heterosexual or gay, whatever, So things like that, I'm gonna start doing that. Hopefully we'll be able to reach all the heterosexual males out there, so we can come together. Like Mr. Daniel was saying, the gay community did it, so now it's time for us to do it. And God willing, we do that.
I think, thank you everyone for sharing. Thank you, Pastor. You mentioned, Pastor, something that was so key for me. Safe place of leadership. Your leadership has shifted, in my interpretation, to welcome everybody in that safe net place. And I think this is part of the keywords in the future of funding. It is for everybody in a safe place. And I think us leaders, and especially the leadership in the spiritual leadership, because my background has been as a chaplain many years ago in hospice care. I think it's so key finding a safe place and have these dialogues, strengthen those dialogues as leaders, and then voice in potential funding. The funding is there. And I just share because I do grant writing for nonprofits, but there's over $500 billion in money for nonprofits. That's federal, state, and foundations. It's also the language. It's also what you know, but also who you know in that network. And my thing is to build those capacity networks for leadership to talk these dialogues of the funding. And like I founded a nonprofit 20 years ago, and one of the strategies that I'm putting is through the expressive arts. We do that with bilateral, with mental health and substance abuse and etc. But we also collaborated, putting everything together in the HIV industry, the healthcare, through the arts, to deal with the mental health, to process. And it is working slowly because my language and then the grant writing to put those, to serve those populations, like we serve the youth, individuals, LGBT community, we heterosexual population, we serve veterans. And so Project Insight, which I founded 20 years ago, that's what we do through the expressive arts to help the life experience of trauma through the arts expression. Because when I was diagnosed 4 years ago, I used those techniques to overcome my divorce, to overcome the diagnosis, to keep my mind focused, the well-being of myself. So part of that funding is very key as we get together and put it together. It's the key that you mentioned is just around like, oh, light me so much light. Is you created a safe place. And I think maybe leaders have not created a safe place for overall the human cause of HIV. And this is a time that we can have dialogue. How do we bridge that? How do we bring our neighbor leader to say, hey, this is how we work together as leaderships, break taboo, break the stigma in all the populations are coming together. And I'm gonna pause there. If anyone in the audience wants to say a comment or come in and say something as we continue moving forward this dialogue and we continue on, having this conversation. Somebody send here for that. Can you tell me about?
That was Alberto.
That was me.
Ask your question.
So
Yeah.
people, they haven't introduced themselves, so.
Okay.
Yeah. I also wonder why people aren't on camera. We'd love to see who you are. But can I touch on something? Something
Sure.
Pastor just said, and then you added to it. I think it's really important to. I don't want it to go just casual. There you go, Pastor. How you doing? And Sahai is on camera with us too. One thing that has also been, and Micah, you and I have talked about this in the past, how it's not just about physical. We spent many years HIV and the physical aspects of HIV, and then we realized that HIV was affecting us mentally. So we brought in therapists to work with us, and we started developing our bodies and making us healthier. Here we are, living all these years with HIV, and we're healthy, and we go to therapy so our minds can be clear. But something that Mike and I have in common is we work the spirit. And the spirit is also what creates a strong leader. And I think, Pastor, I'm going to include you in this list now, since I don't know you, but from what you were sharing, a good leader doesn't lead for himself. He leads for the people that are coming behind him. And in order to find somebody to lead after we can't anymore, we want to make sure that they are aligned mentally, physically, and spiritually. And this is why I believe we do some of the work that we do. I do transpersonal coaching. Micah does his coaching. Pastor, it comes with the name. We work with people. We want to make sure that the person that wants to lead is there mentally, physically, and spiritually. I think that's also part of where that taboo creates. Because if we're just fixing one thing and we're not taking care of all three, there will not be that alignment that will help them keep moving forward. It's kind of like, we've all sat in a stool at a restaurant or a chair that's wobbly. It doesn't sit right. You have to go in there and fix it. And I think I'm going to humbly pat my back. I think part of the work that I do now as an advocate is not just to show up and be like, hey, I'm a Latino who lives with HIV, and I'm here to tell you life is going to be great. It's like, I'm here, a person telling you that there were moments in my life that were not so great. There was addiction, there was alcoholism, there was mental breakdowns, but this is how I worked through it. And these are the tools that I use. So I'm going to hand these over to you so that you can learn, and hopefully you'll pass them down the line, and we can create leaders so that hopefully one day we won't have to be sitting here talking about the stigma of HIV. We you know what, does that make sense? Like, for those of you watching and listening, it's important, and I'm not telling you what to do. This is not a you should moment. This is what I've done to be the person I am today, is I had to be honest about where my mind was, where my body was, and where my spirit was, so that I could become the person that people look to and say, hey, do you have an answer to this? I don't have all the answers, I guarantee you, but God, the universe, life, they've given me the tools that I need to be able to be the leader that people have given me that title. And I humbly take it and do the best I can.
You know, you mentioned that, Daniel, that was the next question, is about what strategies do we as leaders come together and overcome the stigma within the spiritual community? Because there's my experience, and I'll share this. I served in South Texas for a long time in palliative care and hospice administrator, and we launched the first Wall 8 services back there in the early 90s and all that. And I believe one of the religion leaders was very supportive. But when I asked him to, and it was a male, it was one of the top, I would say, leader in that religion aspect, if he could say, join us to present something. And this is what the response was. I could support the cost this way, but I cannot participate. And it kind of looked at me, oh, wow, I'm grateful what they, so far, the facility welcoming that. And what I learned that it's because perhaps that spiritual leader or that individual is dealing with other stuff, right? It could be personal, it could be not aligning, whatever that may be. And so how do we overcome that? And anybody in the audience is welcome to maybe answer, we can discuss this dialogue. How do we strategize as to overcome and educate that spiritual leader, that we value what it is, but what we need more is engage and to participate, because those roles play a key to wake up, shake up, what I call it, our community, that we're not alone, and we continue breaking barriers in the stigma. So that was my other question. So,
if I can just add in before Alberto answers, but not everybody's going to play. I mean, we're talking about stigma, and we're tres Latinos. Not everybody is going to support me. And there's a moment where, growing up Catholic, I had to see the leaders that I was looking at and realizing that the fact was that they were not going to be supportive of my sexuality, of my diagnosis, of my life, and I had to go seek other people. It does not mean that I left my belief in the Catholic Church. I believe in the church. I don't trust all the people, but I believe in the church. But if I wanted to find that connection between God and me, I had to go find. And this is where I'm gonna put him on the spot again. This is where we go and support people like Pastor Andre and be like, hey, you're a pastor. You believe in the cause. Can I support you and you support me? How can we work together? Because we keep knocking on these doors that don't want to open, and then we burn out. And part of the coaching program that I do is about realizing what the barriers and the burnout is. Why am I knocking on these doors constantly if I know there's not a space for me? And turn that energy around and go, how can I help Pastor? How can we help each other and build this up? Pero I get it. Sometimes como Latinos, the loyalty, porque son mi gente, these are my people. I need to be in my group. I need to stay in the community. but sometimes we need to step outside of our own community to realize what our community needs and then bring reinforcement and go, I have to go outside and look for somebody to help me deliver the message. So here's Pastor. I'm not going to talk. I'm going to let him talk for me. You know what I mean?
You can talk.
And then maybe he has the answer. If the compadres, if my friends don't understand the message that I'm trying to deliver because they're straight and I'm gay, well, here's Alberto. Let me get him to talk to you. But I think after 40 years, we need to realize that Daniel G. Garza, I'm not liked in all the spaces that I want to be part of. It's not my job to change their minds. They might not like me for many of different reasons. So I go find somebody that does. I'll pick up my toys and I go play in another sandbox and we build what we want. That's how people create things. That's how people build things. Is you find I have the nail, you have the hammer. Let's do this. Is it sad? Yeah. Does it hurt my feelings sometimes? Of course. Do I come home alone sometimes and be like, what am I doing wrong? Universe, open a door. God, lay the path for me. Where do I go? And it's not always an easy answer. Again, preaching to the choir, y'all know this. Sometimes it's not easy, and you sit down and you wait for the message, and then suddenly Micah calls and says, "Hey, there's a panel. I want you on it." And I say, "Yes, you've got the I've got the hammer. Let's work on this together." But
no, that's true. It's just that word is very important. Having this very diverse dialogue, conversations, like some people saying, we're not having dialogue and breaking those barriers of stigma is assuming that all Latinos like enchiladas. Not all Latinos like enchiladas, right? But when we have this conversation, oh, I was not aware that you don't like enchiladas. No, I don't. I'm Latino, right? But doesn't mean I like, pozole and, menudo and all that stuff. I don't like menudo, by the way, right? But my population might like them, my other friends or my loved ones might love that. But how do we break that? Because it's interpretation. It's not a fact. So the fact is we have a dialogue conversation so we can break the barriers and the stigma of HIV or even the stigma of, of mental health. Because HIV and mental health, the wellness and mental health comes side by side. And even diagnoses that you're dealing with, they come with the mental health. So how do we break those stigma and barriers? We just nailing it, having conversations. We're knocking people's doors. Maybe they don't answer, but they'll come back one way or the other because we're serving community. But we go to those people that are perhaps have the potential to emerge leadership and reach to them. And when we have a dialogue, we start breaking the stigma and the barriers with HIV, mental health. And I think this is one of the opportunities that we can have those tools. How do I do it, right? You knock at somebody's door and they think we might be some, a collector, whatever they interpret it. But the fact is, if they don't open the door, don't worry about it. That's 25 years going and almost 30 years of leadership, development in communities, myself. It's been a battle. It's been a challenge being creative. I have doors closing to me. I had tomatoes thrown at me in the 80s when HIV treatment and the parade. So I learned that. It's as leaders, and I'll talk later on, how do we overcome the frustration of that? And we'll talk about that in a little bit. It's because I believe when the calling comes in, it's not that we're looking for it, comes in, right? It's a calling, we serve it, but it comes with a little bit challenging. People call it discomfort. That's part of the leadership. And that's what I said to one of my loved ones, my group of loved ones, my family. And I said to one of my nieces, she's going to college next year in medicine. And I said, overall, with my family says, when the day comes that I graduate Earth School, because I will, I wonder who's going to remember me. And she said, I will remember you. I will carry you in remembering the torch of leadership because you inspire me. Well, tell me how we inspire. So this is a question: how we inspire and validate the leaders that are now like the pastor. You inspire people And sometimes as leaders, we go, I don't feel it, Divine. I don't feel it, God. And so it builds sometimes discomfort, frustration, right? And how do we overcome as leaders together so we can process that over leadership frustration? Or what are the sources or tools? Or maybe just calling someone as leader to leader and say, I don't want to do this because, I'm very spiritual. Sometimes I say, God, my divine, I don't like this, but I'm in love what I do. Help me out. And somehow it just, that day changes, right? The whole aspect of it. But it's because of leaders, people think it's just like overnight leadership. It doesn't work that way. I come to a very conservative environment, but I always say this, I'm there for a reason. And I always say to the meetings, we're not here to like me who I am in the LGBT community. I'm here to serve community. I'm here to find a solution to it. If it's funding, if it's policy change, because it trickles down. It's going to affect everybody. So the opportunity is breaking the barriers of stigma with HIV and mental health. It's coming together and figure it out. This is an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, an opportunity to brainstorm today and strategize, put a plan of action for the overcome of the 2025. Pastor, go ahead.
Amen. Yeah, just as you were talking, I was thinking about an example of what we really are about or should be about. While I was at the place as a program manager, we had English speaking group, we had Spanish speaking group, we had women's group, we had a transgender group, and all of our groups are open to everybody. The blessing of that is, and that's the attitude that I gave everybody. Again, like I said earlier, safe space for everybody. I don't care who you are. If you having a problem on the day we having this group, you bring yourself here and talk about it. It just so happened that one of the guys' mom died. And instead of him going out and acting out, he came to the Spanish speaking group and somebody there translated for him. And he said, I'm so glad I have a safe space I can go. So that's the attitude that we have to have, because I don't care what your particular thing is. It can be whatever it is. At some point, we all are going to need help. And we have to have our spaces open to receive people. We can have a group for heterosexual men. But if you in trouble and you gay, you bring yourself to that doggone meeting, and nobody's gonna throw you out as long as I'm standing there. And that was the attitude that I had. But sadly, some of the administrators, oh no, well, we can't do that. And I'm like, yes, you can, because unfortunately for them, I was also on our planning council, which made decisions about how they got funding. I know how you got the funding and I know what the contract says, so you can't just exclude somebody because you feel more comfortable dealing with somebody else, and I think that's our attitude. We have to realize that we actually are here to help anybody living with HIV. And that may mean that we have to step out of our comfort zones and help people. Like you said, we need to make sure that these groups get funded, because we know they got problems and they need help too. We have a lot of groups that are getting help. We started out saying there can be nothing for us without us. Unfortunately, as HIV Brown, that didn't seem to matter anymore. But the people that receive the funding early need to realize that they've been able to get a lot of benefits from that same mentality. So they need to allow everybody else to step into that vein as well as they were, so that all of us can get to zero at the same time. So.
Thank you, Pastor. I think you mentioned again, Brown is strong. He is, first of all, is very key in leadership to put our positions in that aspect of committees of funding, because you know what the source is coming from. One of the things that I realized for years is when you are calling for leadership, or you find that it's a calling, start, who am I inside? Because we have issue with our own sexuality, our own issues. Houston, we're not gonna take off. because you got to process that whatever you define yourself or who you are inside or what's outside. In leadership, I always say, who are you? Because what you're going to impact your leadership in the community is going to really impact. You're going to make a change with bringing people together. So as the audience hear this, as you're going to serve or serving, really go deep inside your heart. Where I'm at, where I'm comfortable, where do I need to process people, place, and things, or life experience or events that traumatize me that I have not processed, and perhaps that's going to hinder me to serve my community. And that gives you a time to process it, to overcome with it, with resources, tools, or do I step aside and let somebody come in? That is so key to understand the role of leadership. It is something that navigates you to the calling. I learned myself, I know who I am. I appreciate who I am. I love myself who I am. So when I have to speak in a very diverse population, I share my story, but I'm not here to them to accept my story. I'm comfortable with my story. I grew up with my story. I learned to process my story as a leader, so I could continue serving the calling for humanity. That is so key. And I will address this, knowing who you are as you unfolding your creativity, your calling as leaders. Because once you know that and you process it, it makes it easier for us as you individual, as a leader. Because when they get funded in some organizations, I know it's been over 30 years in managing nonprofits, sometimes the leader's not comfortable of their own self or sexuality. And when you build these groups, they might not want to implement those support groups, but in reality, the funding was there. In education, when I taught education and leadership in the districts, parent engagement was one of the components funding. Well, I make sure that funding was there for the community, for those schools. This was what? So people got a funding, they didn't want to participate or allocate funding for some certain things, but it was in the ground. So when you write a funding for an organization, it's accountability, it's part of your leadership, regardless you don't like it, but you wrote that funding for a reason, and you got to utilize it. So remember, who are you as a leader? Are you comfortable where your space is at as leaders? Daniel,
Like we have 3 minutes.
okay. I'll
No,
leave
right.
I'll leave this. Huh?
We got 12 minutes because it's up to 3.
Is that correct? I think so.
12
But
minutes.
anyone in the audience has questions,
But
just share with us. Do you see
Let's
any
just
comments?
confirm if somebody can let us know, because my timing said 11:50. So let's make sure of that.
it's supposed to be
This is Patty. Yeah, we actually have the break at 3. So, I mean, if you want to go all the way to 3, you can. Just don't go over, because we need people to get a little 15-minute break.
So
Thank
hi,
you.
Patty. So Patty,
Hi.
tell us, how much time do we have right now? Do we have 5 minutes?
11.
It's like 10 minutes.
Okay, so thank you, Patty. We're gonna open it to the audience. Questions, thought, reflection that we as teachers or the panel leaders could help you to overcome whatever you're processing or the calling of leadership.
One thing I would like to see is, for example, if you would talk about churches and HIV, like Pastor Andres doing it, create our own space here in Miami and wherever we're gonna be at, because we haven't done it in Miami. So hopefully I'll do that. That's one thing we need to do, all of us, and come together for that particular issue.
You're muted, Micah. Okay, while Micah comes back, yeah, if anybody in the audience, we have another 5 minutes or so. If you have any questions, comments, you want to put them on the chat, we'll make sure to post our information so you can reach us. You can find us in the WOVA app also, if you have any questions.
Any question, any thought or reflection of the conversation? I know we all could be leaders, information it could be overwhelming, but we have 6 minutes probably. So nothing is right or wrong. Just throw it out there. I want to commend all of us, everybody there in the panel, my colleagues. Thank you for everything, for amazing work. There's a question there for someone. Can you read it, Daniel? Do you
Because
see it?
even as we work on homophobia, we can forget that as a cultural construct, like racism, homophobia can be and is internalized. That's from Marcelo. Yes. I think I'm going to answer that before. I'm already answering. I think as we get older and experience has taught us is that any hate that comes from me usually has something to do with me. And I think a lot of us have, as you get older, you start to like, smells like a duck. No, is it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck? It's a dog. So yes, and I once you know that, I think once I knew that those that were fighting me were dealing with their own issues, I didn't come from a space of anger. I came from a space of, how can I welcome you where you are? How can, and this goes back to what I said earlier, let me meet you where you are. If you have all this internalized phobias, then let me go there and meet you and talk to you in a language that you'll understand. And hopefully we can be the leaders to help you to come out of it. And I'm happy to say that over the years, there have been some people that we started off as sworn enemies. And then as the conversations flow and I stopped looking at them as an enemy, I just looked at them as an ally that I didn't have yet. It made a difference in the way so I don't know, that's my point.
Alberto, do you have any comments, anything before we close?
No, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Rana and Ms. Patricia for letting us do this, and they're always there for us, and we, I want to say that to them.
Thank you. Daniel, any last?
Yeah, it was a great session.
Thank you,
Thank
Patricia.
you. Oh my God, thank you, Patricia.
Thank you for everybody. Thank you for your time. I hope we left you with a little grain of knowledge or information, and please reach out if we can be of service. Thank you.
Thank you, my panelists. Thank you, our guests, very much, our panelists, and thank you, the audience too. Patricia, thank you very much. If you need information from individuals, for me, just go into the chat, put some stuff, we get some feedback, and we're grateful. Remember, I want you to take this today. Be kind, pay forward, and remember you are someone. Have a wonderful holiday coming up, Thanksgiving, if you're here in the United States. Thank you so much.
Thank
Gracias.
you,
Bless
everyone.
everybody.
Gracias.